Hello and welcome to This Naked Chat, a podcast where six friends from different walks of life come together for honest, unscripted conversations about living alcohol-free and everything that comes with it. We all met at a live event hosted by Annie Grace of This Naked Mind in March of 2024. What started as a mastermind group with the six of us and Annie turned into some really deep friendships, filled with connection, tough conversations, and a lot of laughter. And after a year of growing and learning together, we realized that these conversations might help more than just us. So here we are, no scripts, just real talk. We are incredibly grateful to Annie and This Naked Mind for helping us get this off the ground and for the impact that her work has had on each of our lives. I am Brian, and I am joined by Kori, Agnes, Judi, Jenie, and Sammie. Let's dive in. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
So let's see. We have Jenie, Judi, Agnes, and Brian today.
We're here.
Kori and Sammie are still out traveling the globe. All right, we ready for this? Here's the
magic hat.
The magic hat.
Drum roll.
I wish I had stronger readers on. Okay. Difficult conversations, when to have them and why.
This is timely for me because I'm just going through this with one of my coaching clients. Yeah, she and I are having this around a boundary conversation that she would like to have with her spouse. She is alcohol-free and her spouse is not. And he is struggling mightily, actually, with over drinking. And much as I can remember I was when I was drinking, he tends to pick fights with her over minutia when he is not at his best, shall we say. And her wish is to set a boundary such that in those moments, if he's intoxicated, she's not going to engage with him. And in fact, she will exit the room and the interaction. So she and I have been working through how to have that difficult conversation with him. And I think for these purposes, at least, it's, from my perspective, it's important that she not try to have this conversation when he is intoxicated, but rather when he's not. And to kind of do what, in my previous life as a manager of subspecialty physicians, that method that's used widely in the business world, I know, where you sandwich, a good thing, a not so good thing, and another good thing. And you do it.
Sandwich.
There it is, kind of in that order. So we've been role playing various ways she could approach this, starting with, honey, I love you. I see you struggling. I'm not going to engage you when you're struggling. I love you and am happy to engage, when you're not. I mean, in summary, briefly like that. And she's, of course, struggling because it's a hard conversation to have with the person you love the most in the world, maybe except for your children. But she has now in a couple different circumstances had that conversation with him. And it hasn't entirely been successful in terms of him, he's still engaging in the behavior. And what's, I think, important for us as the person that's initiating the difficult conversation to realize is that the other party may continue to engage in the behavior, but our boundary needs to remain firm. If that's the boundary we want, it needs to remain firm. And that's where the challenge lies, I think.
Well, I'll chime in here. So, first of all, what's a difficult conversation? because that is different for every single person. For one individual, it could be just saying that I want this for dinner and not something else because they're people pleasers. And that can be considered difficult to them. To others, it is talking about relationships and everything else. So I think that that's the first step, is really understanding, why is the conversation difficult for you? It's all about you. It has nothing to do with the individual you're having it with, because you're the one who is making meaning of it, or the reaction to it. All of that, there's obviously something deeper inside of you that makes you feel like it's a challenge in some way. So I think that understanding yourself and why it's difficult is important. But I also think that there's other tools that people can use. First of all, when to have them. You should have them when you're above your 50%. So
what do you mean by that?
That's your emotional set point. If you're low energy, you're again, that halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you're anywhere near all of that, well, that's not the time to have a difficult conversation. If you see the other individual that you want to have it with, that they're in some kind of reactive state, or they're not possibly above their 50%, then maybe that's not. It's also understanding who that individual is. Some people, to have difficult conversations, they need a little bit of time to mentally prepare for it. So it could be, again, saying, listen, I really want to speak to you about blah, blah, blah. Can we put some time aside tomorrow and discuss it, or later today? Could you let me know? Give them options. So again, you are setting your boundaries, because it's going to happen, but now you're giving them options and you're letting them know a little bit. So again, you don't want them to get so worried and concerned and creating their own stories in their head now and making assumptions of what's going to happen, but more of a, listen, I want to align with you on something. It's really important. And again, making it about you, because it is about you. It has nothing to do with that individual, because you can't change anybody, and we all know that. So again, it's like, what is that impact that maybe that individual's behavior is, or something they're doing, not doing, how that's affecting you? If they could understand that, then it would be easier to come to some kind of resolution, or some kind of boundary for both parties, or whichever. So I think that with that, there's a lot, you have to be in a state of mind as well where you're very curious. So it's not about walking in with judgment. It's all about curiosity. Because again, why is someone doing or saying what they are? What is going on with them? Because if you could understand that, then maybe there is some kind of perspective you can give them, or some clarity that they could gain from it, as well as yourself. But really knowing what it is that you want. Like, what is your ultimate goal? What outcome do you want from that? And that outcome has to be about not somebody else saying or doing or anything. It's again about you. So
It's
there's
almost
no right or wrong way of doing it. It's complex.
It's almost like you're saying there, like, not going in with an agenda to be right, but to learn from both sides. Like, that's where I tend to probably get into trouble, is like, I'm going to tell them this, and there's nothing to be like, I'm going to learn why, this happens. I think your point too about being above 50 and why I ask what that means, it feels like for me that could be a sticking point to be like, well, I'm not at 50 or they're not at 50, so I continue to delay it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
So I wonder where you find that. Like,
yes,
like that would for me be a point of procrastination, or putting a difficult conversation off. I do that. I can tell.
Yeah, well, that's where, again, it should be done, again, depending on what it is. There are some difficult conversations that need to be addressed immediately, because if there's any kind of safety or anything involved or that type of thing, then obviously you have to have it. But again, it's almost like that 24-hour rule. It's like you got to give yourself some time. You have to bring yourself down to a level where you can be compassionate and curious and on a responsive form opposed to a reactive one. So you could have this conversation. That may take you 20 minutes, going outside for a walk, doing a meditation. I've said it before. I'm giving myself a timeout. I've literally said that to, my husband and my kids. Like, I'm giving myself a timeout. I need to cool down, put my thoughts together, and then come back and have that. So yes, that's, again, it should be done. Well, again, I should say should. There is no right or wrong way of doing it. But the sooner it is done, the better it is. But you just got to get yourself to that calm state.
That's what, when you said 20 minutes, and I was thinking like the next day, it's like that, the more I put them off, the worse I start to go down probably from that 50%, like I delay it. So I feel worse and worse and worse until I've delayed it enough to where I don't even want to have it anymore. Well, so I love that 20-minute type. Maybe it's just a breather break.
But when you know about yourself, so if you know that for yourself, then 24 hours is not the right thing for you.
You definitely have a goal, right? I mean, you have a goal, like Jenie's saying with her person. You have a goal. I need to set these parameters for myself because I can't live like that. And then Agnes also talks about that. Like the whole self-discovery or self-searching of what is it about this that I need to express because I am not comfortable. I can't continue like this between us if I don't come to terms. So like Agnes is talking about, you really got to know what's going on inside you before, and that includes what parameters, like Jenie's talking about, what parameters need to be set. And you have to decide as you're walking into it, how attached am I to these parameters? So that if something comes up that could be reasonable, it's a whole bit of walking into it in respect for the other, right? Because it is a bit of, well, if it's not working for me, most likely it's not working for them either. So, and just because I have the chutzpah, because I'm the one taking the bull by the horns and saying, can we remedy this? Because some people can't. Right? Some people can't walk into those conversations because it's too hard. And these conversations, if they're hard conversations, are hard for a reason. Like, the curiosity point that Agnes talks about, I think that's really key because, well, how do you feel? Here's, can we talk about XYZ? Because this is how I'm feeling a little off and I'm curious about your perception of it. Because that you don't leave yourself in that at all. And you don't leave your boundaries in that at all. You're simply bringing them into the conversation. So then you don't rear up ugly defensive heads or ugly accusatory, because it is about you. It is about whoever's bringing it up. I'm really uncomfortable. And just because I'm not happy with how you're behaving doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means I can't live with it. Or I need something to change, or I need to understand it better, or, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Do you also think to that point, and I've seen this recently with some friends around alcohol conversations that they needed to have with someone else, kind of like what Jenie's saying, is that sometimes what we bring to the table, what I've seen my friends will have said to me about these conversations, they'll say something like, I think they need to. And, like whether it be go to rehab or, have some sort of an intervention. These are big things that in their mind, they're thinking, this is the solution that I think needs to happen. It sounds like all of you are saying you almost need to let that sort of stuff go, right? And like, don't come in with you're not trying to maybe solve this, you're trying to talk about it. Learn from both sides, explain kind of what you're feeling versus giving. The other side seems to be like giving advice or almost telling them what to do or what you think they need to do, which seems to be the wrong approach in a lot of these cases.
In my opinion, unless they are on the brink of like hurting someone else or really hurting themselves, you need to do this bit. It's kind of like all we can talk about is this is how I feel about this situation.
It also, though, I circle back again to that word boundary, because I think fundamentally I really cannot think of a tangible instance, although maybe in the professional world I can, where these difficult conversations aren't around boundaries. And what also is being expressed in these conversations is an articulation outright and concretely of what my boundary is in my relationship to you. And here's where I'm feeling violated is a little bit of a strong word, but I'm feeling uncomfortable or I'm feeling discomfort because you're bouncing up against a boundary in me, and I need to articulate that boundary. And that, to me, is where the work is, because I find for my own self, so often I will have discomfort in relationship to another human without really knowing what's triggering that discomfort. And if I take a minute and say, okay, can I frame this discomfort in the language of a boundary, that gives me something, sort of a concrete grappling hook to hang on to kind of say, oh, well, all right, here's where some clarity is, and here's why I'm feeling uncomfortable. So if I can articulate that and then sit with it and think about, is that person's repeated behavior violating that sense of boundary within me, or is it something else entirely random? I don't know. But so often, I think, as I've learned a lot about this in the last few months, so often I think these difficult conversations are really around boundaries of one sort and another. So that's why I start with that, and I keep circling back to that, because the language of that is very top of mind for me right now. And I think, as Agnes said, the work has to start with defining for your own self what your core values are, which then can lead you to what your boundaries are in any repeated interaction with another human.
This episode is sponsored by This Naked Mind, a revolutionary approach to changing your relationship with alcohol. When it comes to your drinking, you don't have to hit rock bottom to want something different, and you don't have to do it alone. This Naked Mind blends neuroscience, psychology, and self-compassion to help you stop relying on willpower and start creating real, lasting change. No shame, no labels, and no rules. Whether you want to take a break, drink less, or stop drinking for good, This Naked Mind has a program that meets you where you are, with world-class coaching and a compassionate, judgment-free community to support you every step of the way. Learn more about This Naked Mind at thisnakedmind.com.
How do you then, kind of to your point earlier on how to approach it and how to bring up a boundary with someone, it seems like there's a risk there always in my mind of, like, if I just directly say something to someone about crossing a boundary, that's immediately going to put them on the defensive, right? How do you avoid that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like if I come out and say, I had a situation yesterday that I wanted to say something to some people, but I know that, and the way that I wanted to do it is because, like, I was kind of being a shit, for lack of a better term. And I wanted to almost approach it like, hey, I'm sorry I was like this, and let it go at that, versus saying, I'm sorry I was like this. You triggered me, you triggered me, you triggered me, you triggered me, because it would immediately put them on the defensive. Does that make sense? Like, how do you approach it without saying like, I'm sorry, I messed up? Or maybe.
I mean, not knowing what the circumstance is, my answer in that situation would be, I'm sorry I was a shit, and let it be.
Yeah.
Because you're right. You're immediately going to put them on the defensive, and in the moment may not be the time. It may be that you need to step away. And I would say, I'm sorry were you on the golf course, Brian?
Yep. Well, it seems like too, like, and Judi, I know I wanted to hear from you because you shook your head at this one. Is that a fear of mine of having a difficult conversation that I don't want to say to someone exactly what I'm feeling?
I think first, like you said, you triggered me, right? You immediately, that's what you said. You triggered me. So, all right, people are going to behave. Mm-hmm. It's not about their behavior, Brian. Right. It's about what about that behavior triggered you, i.e., what is your trigger?
Yeah.
Right? Why were you triggered? And if you triggered me and that's 3 triggers, holy moly, that's some self-exploration that's got to happen.
Yeah.
Right? And that's when you do, like Jenie says, to say, you know what, I'm sorry, my behavior was not whatever it should have been, however you want to say that, if you feel you need to apologize, because if you didn't behave the way you wish you had, because sometimes I can be triggered by something that really, again, when I'm triggered, I say, how old do I feel right now? I keep going back to that because generally speaking, these are things from 100 years ago. And I know I say this repeatedly, but I can't help it. It's what I find is true. That it might be something that, oh my goodness, when I was 5 years old, this person said this to me and it went into my deep subconscious. So now that person, you triggered me, is actually gift. Because that person then, oh, that's triggered. Okay, let's work on it. It has nothing to do with them, but the person that set that trigger when you were younger, if that makes sense.
For
and
sure.
I'm not every situation is that way. But generally, the things that I most emotionally respond to have a history. Not with the people in front of me, but that trigger has a history.
So is that one that, do you bring that up to people if you're having a difficult conversation when you're saying something like, isn't that what we were talking about in terms of this is making me feel this way? Isn't that the opening to some of these difficult conversations, or is it's not?
Not until you know your trigger, baby.
Okay, I got you.
Because you could still be, well, you're doing this is making me feel like this. Well, okay, what's behind me feel like this?
Yeah.
And like to Agnes's point, until you know what's behind the I feel like this, when you figure out that trigger, then can you say, you know what? Because the onus is on you, really, to manage that trigger.
Otherwise, no matter how you say it to the other people involved, you're going to sound like you're blaming them for your reaction. And no, you can't.
That's where I'm wondering how to open these types of conversations with like in a way that doesn't put them on the defensive.
Well, are you wanting to change their behavior?
No, I'm saying in general. We'll move this away from me nowadays. That was just me being in a really bad mood when I even got to the course. But this is just any sort of these difficult conversations of how do you find opening them up?
I think for my client, it's more about she doesn't want to interact with her spouse when he's drunk, because then he becomes a person she doesn't recognize. So she is approaching that conversation in those terms. She is saying, I love you and I want to be with you like this in this moment while we're having this conversation when you're not drunk, but I don't want to engage with you when you're drunk because you're belligerent, belittling, angry, volatile. That's not the person I married. That's the character you become when you're drinking. And that's not someone I want to engage with. With respect to alcohol, and that conversation with someone one is close to, I think that's pretty clear. And she has obviously laced this with all kinds of compassion for him. And it's not to say it's not challenging, but she doesn't want him to wonder why she's walking away. She wants him to know why she's walking away. And in a sense, she's setting a bit of a rule of engagement for herself with respect to alcohol. I know there are many other examples, but...
Agnes,
Go
Judi?
Agnes. Go Agnes. I'm watching Agnes over
I
there.
know. I want to see how to...
Go Agnes.
No, well, okay, so triggers are 100% your responsibility. And you're responsible for whatever response you have with it. So it has nothing to do with anybody else. So if someone triggers you, I would not tell them that they triggered me because it has nothing to do with them. They don't need to worry about, they need to be who they are. So that's a whole internal thing. And then boundaries are 100% our responsibility as well, because the boundaries are all about us. It has nothing to do with any other individual. So the only time that a boundary could become difficult is if it becomes demanding, because then it's really not a boundary anymore, because now it's controlling. So again, it's what type, how is this boundary being played out, and what exactly is it that they're doing? And with alcohol, that's a really difficult one when you have people around you, your partner or anybody who's drinking, and you're not drinking anymore. And I think that, anyways, the majority of people, everyone seems to, go through some form of difficulties adjusting to that. But that's for everybody altogether, all around. So again, it's all about, you need to have that at the right time. So not when somebody's drinking. You have to explain to them that, listen, this makes me feel really uncomfortable. And then decide what that boundary is, which is not affecting anybody else, because it isn't. It is about you, which means I'm leaving the room or whatever. And then you just got to follow through with it. And I think the focus should be on ourselves again, about what's good for us, because if we take care of ourselves, then everything else will fall into place. So, and I've done that boundary. So there's a few boundaries that I put in place for myself when it comes to drinking, and my partner's still drinking. When the hockey playoffs were coming around, where we have season tickets. So we go to the games. Of course, you've got a stadium full of people. Everyone is drunk, or drinking, I should say that. Now I'm exaggerating. Everyone's drinking. It's loud. There's a lot going on there. And I'm sitting there so uncomfortable. And then I see my husband have 1 drink, 2 drinks. He's having drinks. Everyone around me's having drinks. Everyone's getting rowdy, shaking hands, all this stuff. My nervous system was through the roof. Again, that has nothing to do with him, nothing to do with anybody else. And I had to sit there and I had to figure out. So, of course, my mood changes, everything changes. I'm reserved. I just want to go home. And I took some time to think about it. And what I realized is that environment triggers me into my childhood, where, again, when you're around a lot of people that are drinking, it's unpredictable. So it becomes a safety issue for me, nothing to do with anybody else, because they're all loving it. Safety issue for me. So my boundary is, I can't go to these games. I'm not there. I need to work through this to get to that point. And that's what I explained to my husband. So it has nothing to do with him and him having to stop or not go. Everyone kept her going. They went to all the games except for me. And I was happy and content being at home. And I know that one day I will be able to be in a big environment once I work through that. So again, it's all about the individual. Everyone has to set it for themselves. So anybody who is struggling with a partner drinking, they just have to explain to them in a way that, what it is that they're going to do when they're put in that situation and follow through with it. And then it's their partner's, that's their responsibility after that. It has nothing to do with them. But it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Because
usually we put meanings towards that. How are they going to feel? Are they going to react? Is there going to be an outcome later? Is this going to become an argument? Like you could just, because you got to watch the stories that you tell yourself when you actually put a boundary. If we're not used to putting boundaries in place for ourselves, it is very difficult to do because it makes us extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah. Agnes, when you were talking about, and this, I'll write this down as a topic for another time, because something I'm experiencing similar to what you're saying there is I've removed myself from so many situations that I've almost isolated myself. Does that make sense? Like,
100%.
and this is the same, this is what happened on the course yesterday, if I'm being honest with you. I was with one person who's in active recovery, another person who did go to a recovery center and is now drinking again, and he was drinking again. And I see that, and it triggers me to be like, I need to not be in this environment anymore. It's 100% on me, like you're saying, Agnes. But then there's a part of me that's like, but man, then you're going to isolate yourself. And I'm like, how do you balance that? I think it's a topic for another time, but you.
That's a really good topic for another time, because all my years working with people with opiate dependence, right? It's like people, places, and things. And so people pull away from everything. And then people say, oh, I just stay home. I don't go anywhere. I don't do anything. Because you never know when somebody's going to show up and push that trigger on you.
Exactly.
But again, it becomes mastering your triggers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really does. And so that's where personal work, like if you've not been drinking, let's say you've not been drinking for 2 years or so. Great. Now you're really at a place where you can say, oh, look at this. These things are coming up. These are things you never thought about before because you were drinking. So, or you were numbing out with something. But the more distance you have, if you're doing self-work, the more work you put into it and the more distance you have from the substance, the more you recognize the trigger, and then you can integrate yourself back into society, and you may find yourself with different groups. I mean, birds of a feather, as my mother used to say.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed, because people who you couldn't tolerate when you were using substances because, oh my gosh, they drive me crazy, right? Now you're not using substances. The people that are, oh my gosh, they drive me crazy.
That's what I was wondering when Agnes says that. Like, I feel that going to like Chiefs games here now. I'm like, I just no longer even want to go. So it's interesting if you'll like, reacquaint there or be like, hey, you know what? I'll watch this on TV now.
Yeah, well, I guess it's like what Annie also, what we learned about the whole fusion and cutoff, right?
Yeah.
Those are too drastic. It's like one way to another. So it's like you got to find that in between and figure out what that in between is. So maybe being in an environment full of thousands of people doesn't work, but go to hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So just downsize it a little bit and see how that feels. But like Judi also said, you got to work through it. So, for me, I did breathing techniques. So I'm watching the game, practicing my breathing while I'm watching it because my nervous system was heightened. So again, it's just practicing that, but not doing the full cutoff.
All right, let's go around. What are our takeaways from difficult conversations, when to have them and why? I can start. I don't think I have them.
That's a good technique, Brian.
Yeah.
Just avoid them altogether.
Well, I mean, I know, right? And but I think to what we're seeing, and I've just noticed this a lot lately, is like I think so much of them I put back on myself of like, I'm feeling this. This isn't about them. Like, I'm almost trying to control these people's behaviors to, I think it was Agnes that said, like, you guys be who you are. Like, it's me that is being set off by something you're doing. So it's not necessarily even a difficult conversation that I need to have. It's more pointing to, you need to do more work, Brian, if you want to continue to be around these people.
Yeah, well, so for me, it's difficult. Conversations are extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Extremely uncomfortable. And they take work. It's practice. So again, it's practicing having them and practicing being uncomfortable in them. You'll get better.
I think for me, the first difficult conversation to have is with yourself, capital S.
And I think all of what you're saying, all three of you, is absolutely right on. And the reason that a thing to recognize maybe also that we haven't mentioned is that the conversations are difficult and we have to have them because they matter. Why? Because we care. I mean, I think that's the bottom line. And we care about ourselves, but we also care about that relationship in some degree, whether it's professional or personal. We have a vested interest of ourselves in that, and we don't want to see it fractured. And sometimes the difficult conversation fixes whatever was the fracture.
That's really good wrap up there. It's almost like we're afraid of breaking something there, right? Like that difficult conversation in our minds, maybe it can go two ways. Either good and it fixes everything, or terrible and it ruins it all.
Or that might be fixing it. You don't know,
right. That's what I mean. And like, maybe that's the answer. It's like, that's a tough one to have in your mind. Yeah.
Trust the process.
We're all going to have difficult conversations today. That's it.
I know.
We're going to practice.
Yeah. Thanks for another great session for myself, guys. I appreciated it. Hey, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If something we said resonated, made you laugh, or made you think, we'd love it if you share it with someone who might need it too. And if you're curious about going alcohol-free or just ready to feel more connected to yourself, check out This Naked Mind. Annie's work brought us all together, and we're so grateful for the impact it's had. On that note, a big thank you to Annie Grace and This Naked Mind for making this podcast possible. We'll see you next time on This Naked Chat.